Dear Culture and Literature students, hope you are doing well. Welcome to video 5 for this course. In this video, I would like to look at a few nuts and bolts. We talked about that phrase in our last video. It just means miscellaneous details. And I would also like to review the first half of part 4 in the textbook. Nuts and bolts. First of all, the extra points for the quizzes and the forum seem to be working well. The extra point for those who participated in the academic chat, I will enter manually. They haven't given me access yet to grade the essay questions for the distance evaluation, but I should have that soon and I'll be able to grade those for you. The deadline for the distance evaluation is this Sunday, July 17th. The goal for this video and the next one is to help you prepare for the on-site exam. I'll be reviewing all the information in part 4 of the textbook. Part 4 is called Key Terms and Core Topics, and there are quite a number of them. So I was trying to think of a way to help myself remember them, and maybe it'll help you as well. So I would like to go to a Word document now and show you a memory tool. Sometimes people talk about mnemonics, which are memory tools to help us remember things. And so I came up with these images to help me remember, and on the other side of the screen you can see the text, which helps me remember just a few points about each one of them. So you might want to look at them side by side like that. Word has that option of viewing side by side, but I'm going to just go to the images right now and look at them closer up. And you can see this is kind of like the ground here with a key and an apple core sitting on the ground. Well, that reminds me that the chapter is about key terms and core topics. You can see that on top of this apple core is sitting a poster board, or like a sign, and it has a picture of presents on it and a question mark. What does that remind me of? It reminds me that the first section in this chapter is about absence and presence. And the next phrase in the title is gaps and silences, which is basically the same thing, very similar. And then you see a bullseye, a target, which reminds me of center. And you see this dotted line, which reminds me of margin. And so absence and presence, gaps and silences, centers and margins. And that section talks about how many people, when they analyze literature, they look at what's not there. And what does it mean that some things are left out? And also, what would it look like if it were written differently? What if you change the center? And, based on what's the central focus, what are the things that are marginalized or not focused on? And all those things are used to analyze the literature and try to interpret it. And in this section it mentions that this is very common in post-structuralism, the whole idea of decentering and recentering. Then you see stuck into this poster or sign is an axe, and it's just kind of sitting there, and that reminds me of accent and dialect. And in that section we read about standard accents and local accents. And standard accents are more formal, more imprinted material, and local accents are more informal. And they give a sense of solidarity for people within a certain region. And also points out that everybody has an accent. At the end of this axe handle, you see a hand coming out with a quill in it, a writing instrument. And that reminds me of author and authority. There are two different ways of looking at authorship and authority. Some people see an author as an isolated, self-creating individual. Other people see an author as a social being, and look at his interaction with other people and how that has influenced what he writes. So, two different ways of looking at authorship and authority. Sitting on top of that feather is a canon. Now that reminds me of canon and classic. And in the book, it says that classics are usually considered classics because they have stood the test of time. They have been around a long time and people still think they are great literature. And a canon is a body of texts that are considered classics. You can see that hanging on to this canon is this guy here. He's a pencil and he has a briefcase in his hand and he looks like a character. And that reminds me of character and characterization. According to the book, character refers to the construction of a fictional figure, just like this guy. And characterization refers to kinds of character. It also can refer to ways in which characters are constructed. And the book also points out that characterization is both a creative and a critical activity. If you look closely, you will notice that stuck in this guy's briefcase is a mask. Actually, there are two masks that represent comedy and tragedy. That reminds me of the section in the book about comedy and tragedy, Carnival and the Absurd. Some characteristics of comedy include happy endings and focusing on the ridiculous and laughable things. Characteristics of tragedy include unhappy endings, and they invoke fear and pity in the people who watch them. And characteristics of carnival are that they are expression of popular culture. And a characteristic of the absurd is that it focuses on illogical and incoherent things. Sitting on top of this mask is a disc. And that disc reminds me of discourse analysis. And some of the things that were talked about in this section include dialogue and conversation, communicative practices, and ways of saying things. Another thing that was covered there is power relations and how they relate to discourse analysis. Balancing on top of this disc is a stage. Now that stage reminds me of drama and theater, film, there's your film, and TV. And the author talks about that continuum between drama and narrative. Drama on the one hand and narrative on the other hand. And he talks about drama being acting or playing roles or performing an action. Theater is the place where that action takes place. And there's also this difference between film and TV. There are 4 different ways that they are different. One is the mode of production. Another is mode of transmission. The third is the mode of reception. And then you have different genres too when you talk about the difference between film and TV. On top of this stage, you can see this soccer player, and he has a number 4 on the back of his jersey. And that number 4 reminds me of foreground. And the fact that it is on the back of his jersey reminds me of background. The author points out that everything that an author wants to be very obvious to us in a text is referred to as foreground. And there are other things in a text that aren't so obvious, and those things are called background. Another key term in this section is point of view. It's just a reminder that different readers have different points of view. They see a text from different perspectives, and it would apply to drama as well. The viewer, different people see it in different ways. This soccer player doesn't have a head. What's sticking out of his neck is a sign. It says John Street. That reminds me of the next section in the book, which is genre, or in kinds of text. And genres are just classifications of texts or drama or music. The 3 major genres are poetry, novel, and drama. And those major genres are divided up into many different subgenres. And one thing that we can keep in mind, we should keep in mind about genres, are that they are often mixed. And sometimes just two different genres get mixed together, and many times we create new genres, and they're always changing. That's the second point about genres. And then the third thing we need to keep in mind is that genres are not limited to literature. As I said before, they also apply to music and to drama. Sleeping on top of this sign is a cat. Now, while that cat sleeps, he is dreaming, or he is imagining, a fish. He must be hungry. And that reminds me of the next section in the chapter, which is image, imagery, and imagination. And image can refer to many different things, but in this context, it usually refers to a mental construct or something like a figure of speech. We talk about images. And imagination is the ability of imagining or forming those mental images in our minds. Some of these images are quite humorous and even ridiculous, like the cannon sitting on top of the feather, which would never happen. But I read that the more outlandish and silly your images are, the more likely you are to remember the information you want to remember. And so hopefully these images will help you remember the key terms and core topics in the first part of Chapter 4. In the next video, I will complete this memory tool for Part 4 of the textbook. And in closing, I would just like to remind you of something I mentioned in the last video. The most important thing is to understand the concepts presented in the textbook.